It's a wild world out there, but some worlds are even wilder. Hi, my name is Tyler Hapney, and you're listening to Dungeons and Dystopias. Thank you for listening. Hello, and welcome to yet another episode of Dungeons and Dystopias. I have recently realized that the microphone in the room I am recording in is just not connected to the computer at all. How interesting. Hopefully, this should be the last time my audio quality is bad. I'm going to start really talking to people here, and I think maybe even constantly reminding them that I'm here and that they need to make audio able to be recorded on this campus. Otherwise, I'm just going to go somewhere else, which I probably should have done already. But yes, the audio quality is bad. I'm trying my hardest to fix it, but I am not getting any assistance whatsoever. So with that out of the way, hello, my name is Tyler Hapney. I am your game master and host, Tyler Hapney. I have run multiple hundreds of sessions of Cyberpunk RED and Dungeons & Dragons combined, and this podcast is a way for me to try and rectify my thoughts. If at any point there is any awkward cuts during this podcast, it is because I can also not hear myself. So, great, just really awesome. Fostering an environment where recording is easy in this school of media. Yeah, so as you can tell, I'm having some trouble. But anyways, let's get into today's topic. We're going to be talking a bit about Cyberpunk RED, everyone's favorite cyberpunk tabletop role-playing game about the dark future. A lot of people like Shadowrun, but I think the rules are a little crazy on Shadowrun sometimes. Anyways, we're going to continue our series on the various roles you can play within the game of Cyberpunk RED. And today we're going to be talking about one of, I think, personally, the most interesting roles, considering what you can do with it mechanically, as well as sort of flavor-wise, what you can do with this specific class. And today I'm going to be talking about the Netrunner role, which for anyone who is familiar with cyberpunk media, they likely know what a Netrunner is already. And for those who don't know, a Netrunner is basically the cyberpunk universe equivalent of a hacker. They're able to go into the net, which is sort of, imagine it's more like the Matrix rather than our typical internet today. They go into the net, or in Cyberpunk RED, a local net, but still, either way, a net architecture. They enter and they're basically able to hack their way in and plant viruses for all sorts of things. They can control devices based off of what architecture they're connected into. I would like to mention I'm specifically talking about Netrunners in Cyberpunk RED, not Cyberpunk 2020. So anytime I talk about the net or how it works, I am going to be referring to how it is in Cyberpunk RED, rather than how it might have been in previous editions, or even in Cyberpunk RED's 2077 module for Edge Runners. So we're going to be talking explicitly about Cyberpunk RED's net architecture system rather than the net as a whole, which is an entire topic I could do a whole different episode on, and I probably will. But today we're just talking about Netrunners. So in Cyberpunk RED, what is a netrun? Well, basically, you jack in, that's what it's called, to an access point for something called a net architecture, which is basically a local access network. It's a local area. Usually net architecture covers a whole building, it could, or maybe even just like a single room, something like that. It depends on how heavy security the place you're hacking has. Because it could just be one net architecture, or it could be a bunch of different branching architectures that kind of connect to each other off of a sort of base lobby architecture, which I have done before for higher, sort of corporation raids, things of that nature. So how that works mechanically is you jack in, and then your interface ability is or your role ability is called interface, and for Netrunners, it's really the only thing you have to worry about. A lot of other roles have stats and skills that would be best for them to build into. The Netrunner does not have any of that. Really, the only thing the Netrunner relies upon is their interface ability and their deck. So with a Netrunner, you can really build it however you want. You could have a character, a Netrunner, that's entirely built into like martial arts and has very little intelligence or technique, and they'd still be a decent Netrunner. I mean, don't ask them to do any, technological fixing or anything like that, but if their interface ability is high enough, they're considered a very good Netrunner. So already we get a lot more freedom with how we build our Netrunners. And even then, we can get into so much more kind of business. We could talk about how you can build different Netrunner decks. Well, actually, we'll be getting to that in a second. So from this net architecture, you can use your interface ability to basically interact with the net architecture. It's basically the only way to do it. And typically, you'd start with, I don't know, a password or something. You just have to beat a roll with your interface check. But then you can get into some more interesting things. And those things are known as black ice. Or even other Netrunners, potentially. Demons, all sorts of stuff in there. But black ice is your automated sort of self-defense security measures, and usually it comes when you're net running in the form of like various fantasy monsters like hellhounds, krakens, liches, giants, stuff like that. And all of these different black ice have their own special effects that you can if combine to form something especially potent and deadly, or make it just sort of basic, depending on what level of security what you're hacking has. So from there, you deal with all sorts of black ice. There's ravens, wisps, hellhounds, krakens, liches. I mentioned all those. And each of those have different effects. Some of them, like, they could lower your stats down to a minimum of like 2 or something. Another one is like it can lower your speed. It can reduce the number of net actions you can take per turn, which base as a net runner, I think it's 3 net actions per turn. So that could be knocked down to 2 if you fail your interface check on a defense roll against any of these black ice. Not any, but you get the idea. And then there's obviously other Netrunners you can come across. Some of them may be just defending architectures and setting up black ice defenses and things, and you come across them, and then it's a whole Netrunner fight. They can use abilities within their deck that do more damage to fellow Netrunners and other enemies and things that aren't black ice, which would technically be other Netrunners, enemies, and I believe demons as well, which is a demon is it sort of been pre-placed. It's like an artificial Netrunner. It can use abilities. I think that's a big maybe on that one. I'm pretty sure it can use abilities like a Netrunner can, and it can also influence and control all the different parts of the architecture just like a regular Netrunner could. So if you're fighting a demon, you might have your Netrunner on the offensive fighting it, but at the same time it could be jumping between different turrets and attacking the enemies, attacking your team at the same time. So that kind of gives it a little bit of a time pressure where the Netrunner maybe has to get rid of this demon before the team can move forward, because it's just a volley of suppressive fire, or anytime someone pops out, they get hit. It could add a little bit of tension into the mix there. And I know I've definitely used net architectures to a very similar effect, and it has worked out for me in the past. So that's the 3 sort of things you're going to bump up against in a net architecture. You have a whole bunch of different types of things you can put into your net running deck, which is something you can build entirely differently from character to character. You can have a very basic deck with just sword, shield, eraser, Speedy Gonzalez, a whole bunch of other programs. Or you can build something a bit more complex. I have had players build net running decks that were almost entirely dedicated to fighting other netrunners. So they were like a PvP netrunner, and they would take gigs related to going in and maybe taking out a hacker, or taking over an architecture that most definitely has another netrunner roaming around it. So netrunner fights, very fun. um, they can get a little crazy, but they can also default into zap attacks where you're spending all 3 net actions just zapping somebody for 1d6 damage. That can also happen. Every netrunner has the base zap attack. It's just 1d6 damage, and if you repeat their defense on a interface roll, congratulations, you zap them. If you zap them all 3 times, that's 3d6 damage. It's really not that bad, especially considering your res, unless you have armor or shield or something like that, it doesn't really you don't apply stopping power or anything to that. So you're pretty much just dealing full damage straight to the brain, 3d6, which is crazy. It's very good. But obviously that requires both of you to be jacked into the net architecture and fighting on the same level of the architecture. And then, of course, requires your opponent to not jack out at any point. Which they can do technically at any point. However, there are rules for doing so safely, and if you do so unsafely, you can, trust me, take a whole lot of damage. It's pretty rough. If you get pulled back, you will be pulled through just about every single creature that you've slid past, which is basically an option. You can attempt to just move past something in the net architecture if you pass on an interface roll versus the monster's perception. And if this works out, that's great. You've missed the monster. But if you wind up unsafely jacking out, or even worse, running into a giant or something that forces you back out, you are going through every single layer, and they hit automatically. Which means if you slide down an entire net architecture and you skip, I don't know, 5 hellhounds, and then you get hit by a giant, you're just so unlucky, you get pushed through 5 layers of hellhounds attacks, each of which do 2d6 damage and light you on fire. So obviously you can get lit on fire multiple times, but you'll be coming out of that taking 10d6 damage, which averages out to like something over 30, and you're on fire, which for a lot of, netrunners is basically almost certain death. Like they might have taken some damage beforehand. If they were at max HP, they might survive that. But if they had taken any damage beforehand, there's a very good chance the netrunner could just be frying their brain and going down from that mistake. So obviously, when it comes to actual net running, there's a lot of sort of give and take and consideration that comes into it when it's all said and done, because at the end of the day, you might be risking instant death if you slide past everything and roll very badly against the giant and don't have any luck to save yourself. So ultimately, net running is pretty dangerous, all things considered, considering you can take amounts of damage that are not mitigated by stopping power or anything if you don't have armor active, or somebody destroys your armor, which they can do. They could just straight up just attack your programs and destroy them before going for you. Or you're going up against another enemy netrunner who has, maybe even a higher interface, or stuff like that. There's so many ways net running in Cyberpunk RED can be made more dangerous than it already is. And to add maybe a little bit of extra je ne sais quoi, if so to speak, to your net running section. Maybe a little bit of extra pressure upon the netrunner to do it within a certain time, or to have something done so that the team could just go and continue along their path without having to wait for a door to open, or all sorts of business. We're not talking too much about the different programs, because trust me, there are so many of them. But basic idea for recommendations for me I recommend at the very least 3 different programs. Sword allows you to deal 3d6 damage to black ice programs and 2d6 damage to non-black ice programs. And Banhammer, which is the exact opposite, 3d6 to non-black ice and 2d6 to black ice. So really, you've got something for either, black ice or non-black ice. And then my last suggestion, I'll go for 2: sword and shield. Sorry, shield and armor. That will save your bacon a lot. Trust me, I know it saves my players' bacon quite a bit as well. So if you're planning on building a Netrunner, that's my advice. The rest of it, you can take as you please. Personally, Speedy Gonzalez, stuff like that, really helpful for getting around. But ultimately, the ones that are super necessary are going to be your damaging and defensive capable programs. So with that, I think we're going to move on to today's metaphorical monster of the week. We're going to be going back to companies, and today we're going to be talking about everybody's favorite gaming company from Cyberpunk RED, Segotari. Now, Segotari might sound familiar to some of the people out there because it is a combination of real-life gaming companies Sega and Atari. In the Cyberpunk universe, both companies combined to form a gaming mega giant, and they have gone on to have quite the impact on Cyberpunk's lore, which is interesting considering, it is named after 2 real life companies, which in the long scheme of things, when you look at Cyberpunk RED companies and companies in Cyberpunk RED, they don't have any of those, really, not anymore. In Cyberpunk 2020, they had, Beretta, they had a bunch of real-life weapons companies. And Segotari is obviously from the 2020s era, so that's kind of a holdover. But still, as we go into Cyberpunk RED, and especially Cyberpunk 2077, there is really zero reference to any real-life entities or corporations within that space. So that means Segotari stands out amongst a lot of its rivals and competitors as a company that the player, at least, should have some idea on how they operate. I mean, we know how Sega works. We know how Atari used to work. Maybe they work a little bit more still that way, but they're not obviously that big. But you get the idea. I mean, they just release games. They're also the people that make the Segotari Rush Revolution, and also the people that publish Elflines, the last thing we talked about not too long ago, of course. But the Rush Revolution is, of course, the current top brain dance headset on the market, used exclusively, not exclusively, but very much used by everybody for playing Elflines. I'm almost positive that as part of the generic pre-pack lifestyle, you get a Rush Revolution headset and a subscription to Elflines. That might be one lifestyle up. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure I'm right. So if you have the generic pre-pack lifestyle, you get some Segotari products for free, which is great, really. Now, one thing, a way I've used Segotari in the past, and this is a mission idea you can use for your games, because it's very easy to use, very reusable personally. I've had it so that my players got invited along to storm a warehouse full of rare, Segotari headsets, and it turned out to be, according to the lore, there's a commercially available limited edition Elflines headset that includes fake elf ears, and it's worth way more than your typical Segotari Rush Revolution headset. So the idea behind the mission was to basically steal an entire shipment of those types of headsets and then try and find a way to offload them. And the players had to use their connections, they had to use their backstories, their friends, all that stuff to try and offload all these different Rush Revolution headsets. And they wound up doing it, and I think by the end of the mission, they even wound up selling some of the headsets back to Segotari, in a sort of shady kind of deal there. But yeah, I mean, they're not necessarily a gaming company that's cracking down hard and doing crazy dystopian things. I think really the worst thing they've done so far is replace all of the developers on Elflines with AI. That's that's really rough. But other than that, I mean, it's they're a gaming company. They Another fun fact, and this will be the last thing we say about Segatari, is that they technically are credited with the creation of the agent, which in Cyberpunk Red is basically the smartphone that everyone uses. It can do so much for you. We could do an entire episode on agents, but I'm not going to right now. All you need to know is that they made the first one, the Segatari Double Agent, and it hooked up from there. So that is Segatari, a very, I'd say, influential gaming company within the Cyberpunk Red universe. That'll be it for us this week. Please join us next week for Dungeons and Dragons, where hopefully my audio quality is better. I'm going to be trying my hardest to make that happen. But yes, thank you so much for sticking through us through this tough time when it comes to recording my podcast. Hopefully, it is not going to be that much longer. That being said, thank you all for listening so much. I'll see you next week. Thank you for listening to Dungeons and Dystopias.